I want you to think about when we're hinging at the hips, I really want you to think about moving through the hips and pushing your glutes backwards. So I don't want to see a squat, and I don't want you to bend through the upper back. If you need some help with some balance, we can reach forward through our arms as we hip hinge. And all we're going to do is just kind of explore this, and as we hip hinge, I want you to feel a bit of a stretch down through the hamstrings. I also want you to focus on what your feet are doing through this. So I want you to grip the ground with your feet, and I don't want you coming up and lifting your toes and being on your heels. So we really want to focus on fully grasping the ground with our feet as we work through this movement. Now, if I bring your focus to our upper arms, I don't want to see people reach and bring their shoulders really high up. I want them in a more neutral position, really focusing on bringing that back nice and flat. Okay, so we just finished the hip hinges. Now we're going to go into a tabletop to downward dog. So I'm going to find the floor here. I'm just going to be in the center of my mat. Hands grip the ground. My toes are going to tuck under. The first movement that I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my knees just about an inch off the ground. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push back into a downward dog. Now remember here, for the first few movements, I just want you to kind of figure out what the movement is and how it feels. And then the more we do this, the further we can get into the stretches and kind of pushing back further and further. So I'm gripping the floor here, toes tuck under, knees come off, and I'm really thinking about shooting my glutes to the top corner of the room right there, right where the ceiling meets the wall, and then I'm going to come back down. We're going to do one more here. So lifting those knees up, pushing those glutes back, keeping the back nice and flat, and reaching through. Okay, so I'm going to find the center of my mat again. I'm just going to stand up, neutral position. I want your feet just wider than hip width apart, and I want your feet to be in whatever position you feel comfortable. So I don't need them too far out, too far in. And then what we're going to do here is we're just going to sit in a squat position. So I'm going to squat down as deep as I can go, and then for this first minute, we're just going to explore the lower half of our body. So I really want you to kind of figure out what your hips are doing, where your knees are, so if you need to push them forward, bring them back, figure out what your ankles are doing, what your feet are doing. You're just gonna kind of rock back and forth, just try to explore this kind of lower part of the squat position. I really want you guys to own this bottom position here. So for me, I can tell that I have a bit of a limitation on my left ankle, because when I kind of rock forward, I can see my heel lifting up just a tad versus my right side. So that for me, this is just a chance for me to explore kind of what this position feels like. We're gonna do this for about another 15 seconds, and then we're gonna work on the upper half of our body in this position as well. If you do need to take a break, you can always kind of come out of it and then kind of come back in. But I would suggest you stay in here for as long as you can. Okay, so we finished off with the lower half. I'm gonna plant those feet. I'm gonna stabilize through here now, and I'm gonna just explore with my upper half. So I'm gonna bring my chest forward. I'm gonna kind of roll around side to side, figure out just where I can move my back in this position. I'll give you guys a bit of a side view of that. So I'm here, my feet are neutral, and I'm just gonna kind of let my upper body kind of explore, figuring out what different movements feel like, what some extension feels like, what some flexion feels like. Just exploring through that. Okay, we're gonna do this for about another 15 seconds and then move on. So last little bit, really try and push through, figure out, really try and get some extension, flatten that back, the knees come forward. Okay, perfect. We're gonna move on to a bear sit. Okay, so we're gonna be in a tall bear sit position. So my hands are just gonna come a little bit behind my glutes here. I'm gonna lean back and I'm gonna kind of flatten everything out. So I don't wanna be super rounded in the upper back. I wanna be nice and tall through the chest. My legs are gonna be at 90 degrees, knees at 90 degrees. And what we're gonna do here is we're gonna focus on some rotational aspects of the hip. So if I'm rotating to my left, my right leg is gonna be focusing on internal rotation, my left leg is gonna be focusing on external rotation. We're gonna do these both at the same time, and we're just gonna go back and forth through this. We're gonna focus about a minute doing this, just nice and easily. Remember, the first few movements are just gonna be you exploring, and then the next few are gonna be you kind of trying to find where that end range is and trying to push yourself through that. Nice and slow here, really just letting those hips sink in, figuring out what rotation feels like, because they probably haven't rotated in a while because we've been sitting at desk for too long. So just gonna let those joints kind of work through some ranges of motion they haven't seen in a little while. Nice and slow here, guys, very controlled. Just really pushing just a little bit past where we think, and then moving on to the next one. Awesome. So we're done the minute of our little bear sits, 90-90, and then now we're gonna move on to a half kneeling position. So I'm gonna grab a towel, and this is just gonna support my knee on the mat. Some people, if you don't have a towel at hand, you can just fold your mat in half and put your knee on there. I have a towel, so I'm just gonna place this towel here. I'm gonna do my left leg first. So knee comes on the mat. I want it right underneath you. The opposite leg finds a 90-90 position again. So nice and tall here, foot flat on the ground. To help balance, I'm just going to place my hands, or one hand, on my opposite leg here. The first movement that we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of tuck our glutes under. So we're gonna squeeze through the glutes and almost posteriorly rotate the pelvis. What we're gonna do then is we're gonna feel a bit of a stretch here. The first 30 seconds, we're really just gonna breathe into this, and I want you to kind of figure out what this feels like. So if you don't feel a stretch right here, you can kind of tuck further, you can push forward just a little bit, but I don't want too much movement through there. Our low back stays fairly flat here, so we don't want any excess movement through the low back here. I'm just gonna retuck, and we're gonna take a few deep breaths here. Okay, so that was 30 seconds. We're gonna add a little bit of a dynamic movement to this. So I'm gonna take the same side arm as the leg that's down on the ground. And what I'm gonna do is we're just gonna reach overhead in the same plane. So we're really just gonna try and get a big stretch all through here and come back to neutral. We're gonna do about 4 of these, and then we're gonna move on. Coming back to neutral. Remember, in this, we're keeping this locked down, so we feel that big stretch there. One more. Nice big reach here. And now we're just gonna do a little bit more rotational type aspects. We're gonna reach forward and then pull through, reaching back. Our hips stay fairly neutral through this, and we're just gonna try and get a bit of a rotational aspect through the T-spine as we work our way. One last one, and then we're gonna switch sides. Perfect. So we're gonna work on the right leg now. So left leg comes up, 90-90. Same thing with the hips, is we're gonna tuck that glute under, feeling that stretch all through that right anterior hip here. And for the first little bit, we're just gonna breathe. Really just kind of let yourself sink into that position. Remember, low back stays fairly flat. We're gonna move forward just a tad, but I don't want any excess movement through the low back there. Okay, we're gonna add in those movements now. So right hand comes over, we're gonna reach, and back down. Hip stays neutral, we're gonna reach, and back down. One more time, reach, and back to neutral. Now we're just gonna do the rotational aspect. So we're gonna reach across, pull through, reach across, and pull through. One last time, reach across and pull through. Okay, now we're gonna do 1 last minute in a cat camel position. So we're just gonna find ourselves into a tabletop position, and we're really gonna, hands are just gonna find the mat just underneath our shoulders. Knees are gonna find the mat just underneath our hips. And then your feet can either be curled under or tucked over. I'm gonna leave my feet here. And all we're doing through this is we're focusing on some extension and flexion through your spine. So we're just gonna think about this as a gross movement. So the whole spine's gonna move through extension, into the hips, into the neck, and then the whole spine's gonna move into flexion. Now remember, the first few times, I really want you to just kind of play around, figuring out what this feels like. And then once you have a grasp on that, then you can kind of try and push further into each of those ranges. We're only gonna spend about a minute here. So I don't really care how many reps you do. It's more about just using this time to explore, getting some movement into that back, really just focusing on finding end ranges, getting those joints moving. Okay, one last time both ways, and then that's that. We are done. So with this last flexion, really reach, push the floor away, bring that upper back round as much as you can, and then one last time into extension. Really arch that back, bring those shoulders together, anteriorly rotate that pelvis, as much extension as you can get. And that's everything, guys. So that was a quick little 10-minute mobility routine. If you liked what you saw or wanted to focus on something else, just leave a comment below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.